Hi guys, and welcome to another of our 12 Days of SwitchUp videos. These are obviously a bit more like a podcast style where we look at 10 games that are the best, well, in our opinion, in a certain genre. What are we looking at today, Glenn?
Right, so today then we're going to have a look at some of the best sci-fi games, science fiction games available on the Nintendo Switch. They don't have to be of a particular genre. Any genre goes as long as that's the general theme.
Okay, what are the best games on Switch in terms of sci-fi? Well, let's find out.
Okay, first game then we're going to have a look at is Alien Isolation. This is quite a big hitter, I would say, in this particular genre. So Alien Isolation came out originally, I think it was back on, was it Xbox 360? It was that sort of era, wasn't it?
Yeah, PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, yeah, all of those.
Yeah, that's it. And then obviously came to the Switch afterwards, and the port, first of all, is fantastic. It's a very good port of this game.
Yeah, it's incredible. It was one of the best. I think people like Digital Foundry said that in certain places, which is crazy, it was actually better than the PS4 version.
Yeah, I remember hearing that actually. In terms of the game itself, obviously it's based on the Alien franchise, but it's quite interesting what they did with it. They set it just after the first Alien film, before Ripley is found in hypersleep. So in terms of the chronology and the timeline, I think she was missing for about 50 years. And she basically missed her whole daughter's life in the film franchise, I mean. So this kind of fills in some gaps, and you play as her daughter, who I think her name is Amanda.
Yeah,
and she goes looking, the black box is basically found for the Nostromo, the ship that the first film was set on, and you go off with a salvage crew to see what happened.
Yeah, and the gameplay is quite interesting, isn't it? Because although it introduces things like revolvers, shotguns, different weapons, you're pretty weak, aren't you, when it comes to fighting against the Xenomorph?
Yes. So where some games with Alien attached to them have gone down the marine route, where you have all the weapons and you just blast countless aliens, this one returns to that idea of the alien basically being almost indestructible, and you are hiding, you are running, and you are trying to fight off at times, but it's not about ever really killing the alien, is it? It's just about surviving.
Yeah, and I don't know how you do it with these games. Glenn finds it once he's seen the Xenomorph or whatever it is in the game, he's not scared of it anymore. Personally, for me, it gets worse.
Yeah, no, I mean, as you say, I don't find that. I find that once you've seen it, not straight away, I mean, the first few hours, the build-up is fantastic in this game, absolutely fantastic, by the way. And then, eventually, obviously, the Xenomorph then makes its presence known, and it's truly terrifying. It's one of the best kind of reveals in a game I can remember. And for the first few hours, every so often you'll hear it running through the ducts, and you're not quite sure whether to hide, or you're going down a corridor and you'll see its tail just go off into a room in the distance. But I'm talking end game, 15 hours in, where there's certain parts where you just need to get across the way and get somewhere and do something, and every 2 minutes it comes back into the room, and there's no reason for it to, and it's kind of that AI lets it down a little bit. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Although having said that, it's one of the smartest AIs ever created. I think it's as smart as it could possibly be, but it's still AI, and it starts to show towards the end game. Do you know what I mean? But that would do the game a disservice to spend too long talking about that, because it is truly a brilliant game in its own right, but also a really worthy addition to the Alien story. Yeah, definitely. What have we got up next? Next then, let's have a look at one that I know you very much enjoy, Mark. This is Everspace.
Ah, yes, the little roguelite in space.
That's the one.
You might not know this. I don't think you can even remember, but I'm sure it was made by the same people that made the Galaxy on Fire games. I could be wrong, so I'm sure someone will tell me, and I forget the name. Something like Fish Lab Studios or something. I can't remember.
Right.
But yeah, they made a set of, and this is where I don't agree with the whole like mobile games are crap thing. They made a set of mobile games that were in space, and they were brilliant. They were very much like some of the old classics where you could go off, trade, or go out fighting. You could choose your own path, but within space. But this was a slightly different take on it, whereby it was a roguelite. It has a little bit of that Hades storytelling, where you die and it just keeps telling you a bit more.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was nice. What's a bit disappointing, and I know it's not about this one specifically, they're not bringing. We're getting to that stage now with the Switch where they're not going to bring sequels because the sequel's too powerful.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm a bit disappointed about that. I actually messaged them and said, look, is it coming? They were like, no chance.
Yeah, that is a shame. That is a shame. So, in terms of, I mean, you mentioned it's a roguelite, and I know those, or that word, that phrase does put some people off. Do you want to just give a bit of insight as to how that part of the game works? How is it a roguelite? So when you die, what happens? What do you keep? How do you have to start again? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course, yeah. So basically, you choose your path through the sector, so you can choose your next, where you go to next. But and you're working towards a very specific end goal. But when you die, like many of these things, you can basically spend a currency to improve your ship, or you can buy different ones or unlock new ships.
Right.
What is quite cool is, like I was saying, you have side quests, but they can play out over several runs, so you might not complete them on one run, but then you'll bump into that person or character that you were supposed to on the next one. It gives it a bit of, what's the word?
A bit of continuity.
That's the one. That's the exact word. Nice one.
So when you die, are you the same person again?
Yes, yeah, you start again. Again, it's been so long since I played it. I'm sure you're a clone.
Right.
You're always a clone, aren't you?
So that's how they keep that continuity. You're a clone of your former self.
Well, I thought so. I'm questioning myself now, but I'm sure it is. But either way, I've remembered the name of the company now. It's Rockfish Games, so I was pretty close. Yeah, great game. Really, really, really good. Actually, very impressive.
You do realise you're about 3 minutes behind giving the information when it's needed, which means in 3 minutes' time you'll tell me whether you're actually a clone or not.
Look, who says it's needed or not, right?
Who's to say?
Who's to say? Not you or I, Glenn. We are merely here to entertain.
Right, the next game then we'll look at, quite similar to Everspace in some regards then, is Rebel Galaxy Outlaw. This was another one that you reviewed, Mark, and thought very highly of, wasn't it? Yeah,
well, kind of, yeah. I wasn't overly enamoured with the main character, honestly.
Right.
I mean, look, I'm a massive sci-fi nerd. Like, oh man, I don't even want to say this. I am a Janeway fan. Like, I liked that Star Trek. Don't say anything, Glenn, please. I liked it. So I kind of, I don't have a problem with a strong female lead. But I just didn't find her. I found her a bit wooden. But having said that, I'm not sure I gave her. I don't know. I've kind of gone back since and realised that it was an intentional. The acting there is intentional, and it actually plays into the story. And by the end, it makes a bit of sense the way that she is.
Okay, well, all right, fair enough.
So yeah, I kind of changed my opinion on that, honestly. Yeah, you haven't played this one. It's. I'm trying to, while I speak, remember the name of the game it references. You'd be like straight away, but it's not the way my brain works. But essentially, it's Freelancer.
Freelancer, that's it. Yeah. See, I haven't played that or this, so I can't be of a huge amount of help. But I do remember when the game released, we were looking at reviewing it, just doing a bit of research on it and seeing the similarities with Freelancer. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very much one of those where it again gives you the freedom, but without the roguelite element. So if you were looking for something that was a bit more, it's not linear. But it doesn't, you're not having those constant deaths and retries. When you die, your ship goes back to the nearest, star base, and you can repair and things like that.
Yeah, it's all encompassing. You don't have to worry about that part of it.
Exactly right. Which, honestly, between the two, I would have thought I'd prefer, but I actually prefer Everspace as a game.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, the thing is, roguelites, when they're done well, are fantastic games, aren't they? That's.
Yeah, and I've actually remembered why. It's a really nice space-based shooter. But it's a bit too hands-off on the combat. Like, it locks you on to the nearest enemy,
right?
And you don't have to do a great deal to stay. It doesn't feel like a dogfight. It feels like a button press, at least in the earlier stages. And then it kind of, you get different weapons and it becomes a bit more hands-on. But yeah, almost the opposite of what you would expect.
So would you say this is one of those? If you're a fan of Freelancer and you've kind of accepted that that's not coming, if you're looking for something to relive some old memories, it would do you well.
Definitely. Yeah, it's a very good game, and it's got the little bits in between that people love from those style of games. You can play pool, you can join different factions and become a bit of a beastard. But yeah, you've got that. It's in there. It's a decent game, and it also had quite a few performance issues at launch, which always winds me up.
Yeah.
Especially in space games, because they might not look it, but they're not actually that demanding.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, but yeah, overall decent game, and like you say, a good one, good alternative.
Right, next we're going to look at a game then that's new to the Switch, but is old in every other sense of the word, and that's Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. Now, this game is a very well-loved game ever since it first released. I remember I used to work with a man many years ago now when I was a teacher. He was like my year group partner. We used to work together. And he didn't like video games at all. Like, he had no interest in games, but he loved Knights of the Old Republic. Like, it's the only game he'd ever played.
Yeah, I think there's quite a few people that might say that about this game, honestly.
Yeah. This sees you playing, I think it's a prequel, isn't it? It's set like thousands of years before the Empire, is that right?
Yeah, it tells the earlier stories.
Right.
Kind of sets the foundations of, why are these people doing what they're doing.
Okay.
But yeah, it features heavily the Sith. Are you a big Star Wars fan?
Not really. And I mean, I've seen all 6 of the films, and I've seen the 7th actually, the one they brought out years later. I enjoyed the first 3, the original trilogy. I thought the next 3 were quite cheesy. I don't know what the general consensus is, but they just seem to be incredibly aimed at children. Whereas they're always family friendly, they just seem to go very much aiming at children, as far as I could see anyway. Maybe I just got older, I don't know. But then the 7th one, which I went with you actually to the cinema to watch, it was fine. It just seemed like the first one again, but just with different characters. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. Yeah, no, you're right. That's exactly, I'd say, the general consensus. When you've got people like Jar Jar Binks in your face, it's like, no,
exactly.
thanks.
Jar Jar Binks. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a fan, so I don't know whether he's loved or hated. I'm assuming he's hated, but
yeah.
I remember watching that first film of the new lot. I mean, and just thinking, what on earth is this? Like, who's this character? Keep jumping up and shrieling at in the screen at me and stuff. It was just a bit odd.
He is the character version of Glenn's worst nightmare.
He is exactly that. Yeah. If you could put everything I hate about everything in the universe into one person, Jar Jar Binks would pop up and say hello at me.
Okay, so Knights of the Old Republic is classic BioWare Obsidian from the days when they knew how to tell stories without feeling like they had to go into split genres. So with some of their more recent games, they've gone a bit off the rails, turned them into shooters and things. But with this one, it was very much about the character and the choices that you make. And it just had a very simple and obvious system where you saw, whether you were going to the light side or the dark side on the inventory screen. You could actually see your character either like gradually going red and the camera would shift underneath, or becoming more light and going above. It was a really nice system.
Yeah, I've said it a few times, not just about this one game obviously, but any video game that's based on a movie franchise, if the game is made years after the franchise, if it's made years after the movie, and it gives people time to look at what's been done on screen and think of a viable storyline that fits in with what's come before, the game is always fantastic.
Yeah.
And this sounds very much like that's the case here, where they just fill in some gaps, tell a bit of pre-story, and to do it to very good effect.
Yeah, completely. So what have we got up next?
Next up then we have Crysis. So we have 3 Crysis games on the Switch now, don't we?
Indeed, yeah. Yeah, or the remaster trilogy, isn't it?
That's right, yeah. So the first one came out to the Switch, at least. I think it was last year, and the other 2 have arrived more recently. And obviously Crysis is this series where there was the meme, wasn't there? Can it run Crysis? And obviously the answer on the Switch, to be fair, is yes.
So yeah, this was from a time when publisher EA were actually, and I mentioned this in my recent sales video, they weren't always the EA that we know today as these money-grabbing cretins that release, FIFA in the same game for 4 years in a row. They were once very conscientious. They once created games like Crysis.
Yeah.
This didn't have any. This wasn't Crysis at the time. It was developer Crytek saying, "Hey, this will be good," and EA saying, "All right, here's a chance. 2007, make it happen." And obviously, we all know what happened there. There's including the remasters, they've released 7 of the, not the same, but 7 games, and they are good games. These remasters on Switch, the first one was a bit iffy, in terms of visuals. It was okay, but a bit iffy. I'd say the most recent 2 and 3, which we covered on the channel, are incredible ports. Really nice. It's got all the things you'd want in their gyro controls. I guess the main hook for these games, I don't know how much of them you've played, is those nanosuits and the nanosuit abilities.
Yeah, I was just about to bring that up. That's kind of your big sci-fi angle, isn't it?
Yeah, completely. And the first one, it was a bit more hands-off. But on the second two, you could actually toggle more individual abilities, making it feel a little bit more like, almost like a superhero game, you know?
Right.
So, yeah, those are the Crysis Remastered trilogies. I'm sure most people have played them. First-person shooters, more sandbox than your average. And on Switch, at least, very, very good games.
Nice. Okay, we're going to have a bit of a change of pace now then. The next game is called Observer. Now this, I suppose, I mean, it's an adventure game, is what you'd class it as. Elements of point and click to it, I suppose, as well. More cyberpunk is your sci-fi angle. It goes with the cyberpunk theme. And it has a great sense of atmosphere to it, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. I'd say that most of that's carried by Rutger Hauer, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, most certainly.
R.I.P.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, any fan of science fiction, obviously hearing that name, Blade Runner, comes to mind. Plays a very different character in this, but does a fantastic job, doesn't he?
He does. This is from Bloober Team. Are they the ones that did your favourite horror game?
They did, or it's one of my favourites in Layers of Fear, yes.
There's definitely some horror aspects to this one, right?
I would say so. It has the dark side of cyberpunk. You know, cyberpunk, if you were to boil it down to a very basic set of ideals, it would be your neon lights, your rain lashing down, your flying cars. Do you know what I mean? And it does have elements of that, don't get me wrong, but it does delve into that darker, more dank side that Blade Runner, that I mentioned just now, did so incredibly well.
The thing about Blade Runner is, obviously you've got what's his name, the main character?
In Blade Runner, Deckard.
Yeah, Deckard, sorry. You've got Deckard who's doing the investigation, and I think this game captures quite nicely the investigatory elements of Blade Runner.
Yeah. It's almost, as was Blade Runner, Observer is almost like film noir, but in the future, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And you could hack into people's... So you could have a dead body, and rather than just look around the crime scene, you could actually hack into them, couldn't you, to see some info on what happened? Absolutely,
yeah. As I said, I mean, we've gone from Crysis and Everspace with your dogfights in space, and then Star Wars. This is very different. It's one of those experiential games, isn't it, almost, you know?
Yeah, it is. It does go a bit crazy at one point, because it throws in almost the Outlast. It throws in the being hunted by this, and that was a bit odd. Yeah.
Well, it's funny you say that, slight tangent, but Layers of Fear 2, we just mentioned Bloober Team, did the exact same thing. So I don't know if maybe they started to feel they were caught between two stools and that they needed a bit more action in their games.
I think you're right, and I think, and we'd probably both agree on this, a lot of these scary games, the most scary games, are the ones that do the least trying to scare you.
Absolutely right, yeah, absolutely. There's only so many times you can run away from something before you get fed up with it. It's atmosphere, it's all about atmosphere. And the first Layers of Fear, you just mentioned it's one of my favourite horror games, and it is, even though it is effectively just a walking simulator, and if it had just dialed down the jump scares just a tad, it for me would have been, for my personal taste I'm talking about obviously, but it would have almost been like the perfect horror experience. Not necessarily the best game, but the perfect horror experience, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And I think this one comes close, but it does a few of those mistakes again.
Yeah. But very good game, well worth checking out. And talking of very different experiences, we're going to go kind of the other end of the spectrum now. This is Hyperlight Drifter. So having just talked about the lack of neon maybe in Observer, this one just burns your eyes off, doesn't it?
It does. It's been so long since I played this one. It's a very well-known game. So it's a 2D action RPG, I guess you could call it, ARPG. Much of the sci-fi element, I guess, comes from the aesthetic.
Yes.
You know, it's all set within this sci-fi. It's quite an unusual art style as well to have in. Well, it's not a normal art style. It's similar to what I believe the developer wanted to do, which was replicate some of the old SNES ARPGs in terms of its gameplay. But then it includes more modern things, you know, like some of those quick moving, dodging mechanics, which I don't think were in any of the older games. You could correct me if I'm wrong.
They weren't quite as fluid back then,
right?
As a rule, you know, obviously with the limitations in what you could do on control schemes without sticks at the time and stuff on the D-pad, D-pad instead. Yeah,
fair enough. Well, it's got a bit of, we know it's got a massive following, this game. It is incredible in terms of just having very slick systems. But I also think it's one a bit like The Binding of Isaac, where it has that kind of, that kind of following.
Yeah.
People that have supported it the whole way through. I believe it was a Kickstarter, and
Right.
it has that kind of following behind it, but it also has the gameplay to back it up. But yeah, it's well worth giving a go to. I don't think either of us have finished this one.
No, I haven't.
No, I've probably put in about maybe 10 hours or so. Not enough that I would be willing to do a review of it, which is why we haven't got one on the channel.
Yeah.
But it's a very good game.
More than
and
enough
it's well
to
worth
say it's fantastic, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Nice. Well, another game with quite an interesting art style next is Axiom Verge. Now, this is a Metroidvania, quite possibly the first on this list as I look down. I'm pretty sure it is. And it quite heavily takes inspiration from Metroid in some respects. But at the same time, it very much does its own thing. It's set on a planet, and it's again got a very heavy cyberpunk feel or vibe to it in terms of kind of hacking into computers, and you kind of see the remnants of your work. You're a scientist through the world that's been created, and it's just the level design is incredibly tight. It's one of the best modern Metroidvanias I played in a long time when I did first play it, and I just also loved the story that went with it and the world that it built,
Definitely. For me, like with these types of games, and obviously I haven't played the first one, which is strange, but I've completed the second one.
Yeah.
But with these types of games, I always see if you can feel what the intent is behind it, And I know Thomas Happ, I don't know if it's the same in the first one, but in the second one, he's very much focusing on alternate universes, like parallel universes, and jumping between them. And I think the first one, from what I've read, did that slightly better in that it wasn't so overt, it wasn't so obvious.
Right.
It's so overt in the second one. It's all laid out, It's almost too much. It's still a good game, but there's no mystique, there's no mystery there.
Yeah, exactly. With the first one, I mean, it was drip fed to you, It was very much where am I, what's going on, and then things started to become clearer as you went on, which is, classic storytelling. But I also liked, I have to say this, I love it when games do this, is how the first game adopted kind of your 8-bit art style, and the sequel went for more of a 16-bit, possibly pushing 32-bit art style. I love when games do that, modern games do that, where they show almost the progression of computer generations, console generations through their own work, through their sequels. It's just very clever.
Yeah, I think that's probably the defining word for the two games. They're very clever, aren't they? They're not run-of-the-mill. No,
definitely. There's a lot of love has gone into them. Right, next then, we're going to look at a game called State of Mind, which, if I were to compare it to one of the games we've already mentioned, it would be Observer in terms of that adventure game style. Not a huge amount of pure gameplay to it. It's a lot of walking around, a lot of talking to people, but it tells a very good science fiction story, hence the reason it's on this list. Now, I reviewed this one back in the day. This was a game I bought myself. I imported it from Germany. It didn't have a release in England at the time. I don't think it has still to this day, actually. And as much as I lamented some of the, it could have had a bit more meat to the bones in terms of the gameplay, a few more puzzles perhaps. I love the story to the point where, the 15 or so hours it took me to finish felt time well spent. Yeah,
it's also got Geralt of Rivia in it.
It has indeed, yes, he plays the main character, you're right.
Good old
Dave
Doug
Cockle,
Cockle.
isn't it?
It's Doug Cockle, but Dave's his
my
mate.
Apologies, that's right, yeah. Dave? Who's Dave?
Everyone's got a mate called Dave, though.
Exactly, yeah. But yeah, I loved the story it told, so I won't go too far into it, but basically your character wakes up, I think his name's Richard, having just got Doug Cockle wrong, though I might be wrong about that as well. But you wake up having had a car crash and your family have disappeared, basically, your wife and son, and you're looking into why. I won't go much further than that because there's no need to, play the game. It goes on sale so often for about £1, £1.50. If you're looking for a story to be told through the medium of games for that price, you just can't go wrong.
Yeah, too right. There's a very similar premise to this on Netflix, and I forget what it's called. We watched it together. What was it? You know what I'm talking about? The one where they get different bodies each time.
Oh,
like
I do remember that.
Yeah.
I forget what it's called. It was a while ago.
We'll tell Dave and he can flash it up on the screen. But
Yeah.
it's almost like the game version of that.
Yeah. But yeah, like I say, if you're looking for pure gameplay, you're not going to find it here. But if you want a nice science fiction story for a good price, whack it on your wish list, and it goes on sale often. Right, another heavy hitter now. This is The Outer Worlds. So Mark, you've played stupid amounts of this one, like stupid amounts. You've wasted half your life on this game. So I'm going to pass over, and you can have a chat about this one.
Never heard of it. Yeah, no, The Outer Worlds is basically, I almost called it poor man's Fallout there, which would be a bit harsh, because it's, you know, it's from Obsidian, who obviously worked on the best Fallout game, which is New Vegas, and Glenn's earpiece has fallen out again. I like that it pinged in his cup of tea this time. That was
hopped across the room, poxy thing. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Yeah, so The Outer Worlds, it's very much Obsidian going back to their roots of Fallout New Vegas in terms of the characterization. You've got, you know, people with giant moons on their heads. You've got a corporation in the background who are doing all kinds of dodgy things. But it's still got that first-person aesthetic. It's still got your quest lines. You can still just basically do whatever you want, in air quotes. You know, you get a mission to save someone, or you can shoot them in the face and take all their money. I don't condone that, but you can. And it didn't perform well on Switch at all. So in classic style, we did the thing that we do, which is where we review the game, and then we say in the performance segment, you know, this is no good. And everyone else was like, this is a terrible game, don't buy it. And I struggle with that.
Yeah,
I struggle with that. I get the performance is a big deal, but you've still got to judge the game on its other merits, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Hence our scoring system.
Exactly right. And this has since had so many patches. It's never going to be perfect on Switch. It just isn't. Although interestingly, it's the same engine as most of the games we've said on this list.
Yeah.
Unreal 4. But yeah, it's good enough in my opinion, and having it in handheld, it's a different type of experience.
Yeah, and that's it, isn't it? I mean, sometimes I suppose you've got to accept, you know, a downgrade in certain areas of a game to have it and be able to play it portably. And if you are one of these people that has a Switch but plays predominantly on the big screen, and fair enough, that's something you might not want to accept, and that's a completely fair point. For me, and I know you're the same, Mark, being able to play these games and play them in bed and not have to worry about the TV when the kids are watching whatever, or your missus is watching what she watches, it's worth it, isn't it?
It's priceless.
Yeah, exactly right. Okay, right, next game. This is called Valfaris, and this is a beautiful game. I absolutely love this game. It's basically a run and gun. Very similar, I guess, maybe to Turrican in some ways, in that it's not completely linear like some run and guns are, but it's also not as open as Turrican was. But it has that kind of, it's pixel art almost, but it almost looks like 3D rendered onto 2D sprites. Do you know what I mean?
I do. So I'm laughing at the moment because I remember. Do you remember when we went to the expo?
Yeah.
We held the giant Valfaris weapon.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
The picture, I'll send it to Dave. The picture is so cringy.
Yeah, but that was your fault. They said, "Oh, look, here's this big prop. Like, you know, do you want a photo taken?" And you jumped in as you do, and I stood to the side. I was like, "No, I'm not having any part of this." And you were like, "Come on, get in the photo." So obviously, I'm standing like a right lemon, like, clutching this big weapon. Oh no, yeah.
It looks so dodgy, doesn't it?
Bad times.
Bad times. Sorry, carry on.
Well, yeah, as bad as their props are at the expo, their game is fantastic. It has that metal feel to it. Stupidly hard. It's from the same people that made Slain, which, as much as I enjoy that game, I think this improves on that in practically every way, to be perfectly honest. It has the neon, the bright colours, you know, as I said, the heavy metal music. And the gameplay is so difficult at times, but we said in a previous one of these videos, I don't always enjoy that difficulty, curve, or not so much a curve, but like an upwards trajectory. But I loved it here. Didn't matter how many times I died, just got straight on, tried again. Fantastic game. Really, really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, I haven't played this one. I've played Slain. I think you put me onto Slain actually.
Yeah.
And it's they're both very, very difficult, and I'm surprised you like them as much as you do.
So am I. I'm surprised. It's funny sometimes how certain games seem to transcend that frustration that I find with difficult games. For whatever reason, whether it's the aesthetic, whether it's just, you know, the whole package coming together. I do love run and guns though, having said that, so that's probably a big part of it. But this one just works so well. Slain is a good game, don't get me wrong, but this kind of is a bit more all-out action, no mucking about, shoot everything in sight. I love it. Such a good game.
Ideal.
Yeah, definitely. And we're going to end the list with a big one, with a heavy hitter. One that probably, you know, people will say, well, if that's not in here, I'm going to riot. Yeah. So we saved it till last just to wind people up. But that is Metroid Dread. So obviously the most recent game in the Metroid series. Tells a fantastic science fiction story, which is, you know, what the list is all about, of course, but is also a very good game at the same time. Now, Metroid for me, I would say, is probably Nintendo's best vehicle for telling a story. Some might argue Zelda. I would say that Zelda tells very good individual stories that they try to bunch together on a timeline, but in terms of a cohesive story, I think Metroid is Nintendo's best. And this is set just after Metroid Fusion, which came out on the Game Boy Advance many years ago now, and it tells the rest of that story very well, but it also introduces things that are new to the Metroid franchise in terms of the EMI robots, which are kind of these strange devices that will track you and hunt you as you're trying to go about your mission. Now, we've mentioned kind of things being repetitive and overused, and I fully expected the EMI robots to do that and to get annoying by the end. And whilst I'm not saying they're fantastic and they work perfectly throughout the game, because they don't, I was never... The way the game handles them and spreads them out, I never got fed up with them. And I found each one a new challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't played this, but I do know of the... It's not Nintendo that make this, right? This is it's another developer called Mercury Steam.
Yes.
And I think they made Samus Returns.
Yeah, I believe
on the
so.
3DS.
Yes.
Yeah, on the 3DS.
Yes.
And it does interest me when it's not directly Nintendo, yet it's probably the best received, what would you call it, first party game in a while.
Yes.
It's like they've looked at the originals and gone, okay, what do people want, rather than what do we want to do, which is very often what Nintendo do, right?
Yeah, I think Nintendo, with some properties, for the most part, they'll never give up. You know, they'll keep them in-house and they'll develop them themselves. With others, where they've created an IP that people want more of, they seem quite happy to pass them out and allow other companies to do their thing. And with Metroid, they've done it to success in a few different ways. You have the Prime series, of course, which are first-person games, and you now have, as you say, someone taking on the mantle for the more traditional side-on Metroidvania series. Now, one thing that people didn't like about this game so much was how short it was. I think when I finished it, the in-game clock said 10 and a half hours, but it doesn't include deaths. So I would say maybe 12, 13 hours was a fairer representation of my time with the game. For me, that's perfect. That's about as long as I want to spend with a game. And that's how long most Metroid games have always been. You know, they've never been these huge 30, 50 hour extravaganzas, which Metroidvanias have almost become over the years, down mainly to games like Hollow Knight, which are so good and so cheap that people kind of expect that all the time now, you know? So if you do want that kind of experience, that sort of length of game, you're not going to find it here, but it just depends what your expectations are, you know?
I fall into that camp mostly. I do sometimes, you know, when you've got games like Hollow Knight that are potentially hundreds of hours long, that also is hundreds of hours of quality, but much of it is optional, I potentially prefer that system. You know, you can do Hollow Knight in 20 hours, but there is more content if you want. Whereas Metroid, you're going to do it in 10 to 15 and that's it done, right?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, there are bits you can find to 100% it, but there aren't any side missions or anything like that as such.
Right, okay. Yeah, but I do need to pick this one up. I'm quite jealous, honestly.
No, it's a fantastic game. I mean, if you're not wanting to pay 50 quid for 12 hours of gameplay, I understand that, of course. If you find it for a price that suits you at any point, I don't think you'd be disappointed with the gameplay. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly right.
Lovely. Well, they are 10 of our favourite science fiction games on the Nintendo Switch. As we said, I reckon there's a nice mix of genres there, to be honest. We've got your Metroidvanias, you've got your point and clicks, all-out space adventures. There's quite a few different games there, aren't there?
Definitely, yeah.
Tomorrow will be another one of these videos with another topic and another list of games, hopefully that you'll find interesting, some games maybe you hadn't heard of. And as we always say with these videos, the comment section is where it gets interesting, because you can get yourself down there and put your favourites in there and open our eyes to a whole host of games possibly we didn't even know existed.
Exactly, and this is a moment where you can push those earphones in a bit extra, Glenn, because I know you love this bit so much. Thanks to everyone for watching, for our Patreons, for supporting us every single month, and it's just been an amazing year. We do thank all of you, and as always, for all things Switch all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys, see ya!